Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for The Cat's Tale, released in 1941. It's the 318th in the series and it's directed by Freleng. At the time of this recording, there's no physical media release of this short yet, although it has been restored with the blue ribbon titles. Hopefully one day it'll make its way on physical media, and if it does, I'll leave a pinned comment below. It is under copyright, so I can't show you the full thing here on YouTube, otherwise the video will just get blocked. But in case you haven't seen this one, as it might be a little bit more on the obscure side, depending of course on where you live and if it was being broadcast at the time, it's your typical cat chases mouse short until it isn't, because it starts off fairly straightforward, but the mouse decides he's had enough and he convinces the cat to stop and to also confront the dog that's always been chasing the cat, and to do pretty much the same thing, though things don't quite work out, as we'll soon see once we go through the short. So it's a really interesting idea, and again, we'll go through that in just a moment. Trivia-wise, the big one is that this is the first time you have Maltese and Friz Freleng paired together. We mostly think of Friz Freleng directing shorts by Ted Pierce, and then later on having Warren Foster as his writing partner, and I would argue Warren Foster was his best writing partner, but that's just me. Now we know this as well because recently in Maltese's personal collection, there were a whole bunch of title cards that were found, and one of them was this one. And yes, it's damaged, but at least we can see what it should look like. Because at the time of this recording, the title cards have not been found on an actual film print, so yes, we could potentially restore that title card, but what music is going to go with it? So it's not going to quite work out. Still, it's great to see these little artifacts pop up every now and again, and this was only, I believe, in around 2020, so things are still popping up even after all these decades. But honestly, even if we didn't have a bit of evidence, and I was to state my case that this was written by Maltese, you can see all the traits of Maltese all throughout here, especially with what he did with Chuck Jones later on. And I've always felt Chuck Jones played up to Maltese's strengths better than Friz Freleng, but you've got your long dialogue scenes, which would have play on words, but also subverting expectations, and you even see the sign gag later on, which is something that Maltese and Chuck Jones will do later on in the Hunting trilogy. So it's quite clear when watching this was definitely written by Maltese. Would this have been better if Chuck Jones directed it? Maybe later on, but around this time, Jones was still getting out of his Disney phase, so I don't think the short would have been as effective if Jones directed this short at this time. Vocal-wise, Blanc does all the voices here, so he does the voice of the cat and mouse and all the grunts of the bulldog, and that information comes from Keith Scott's wonderful Cartoon Voices book. But even then, if you know what Blanc sounds like, you know it's him. But the cat voice is interesting because the cat sounds like Blanc's natural voice at the time.
Why, cats have always chased mice. Dogs have always chased cats. Gee, I couldn't do that. By gosh, I will.
At that time, he would have been a younger man. He was born in 1908, and this would have been recorded most likely in early 1940. So if you want to know what he sounded like as a younger man, this is one of the better examples. But another thing you guys might think is this another case of Friz Freleng ripping off Tom and Jerry? Because there is that infamous case later on where you have the Cat Concerto and Rabbit Rhapsody having the exact same idea. Well, I don't think so. The timelines do kind of match up because the very first Tom and Jerry short, Puss Gets the Boot, that was released in February 1940. This would have been in production roughly around then, so maybe there was a bit of an influence, I don't know. But honestly, cats chasing mice, that's been around for ages in animation. If anything, this may even be a commentary on Friz Freleng being sick of the idea and wanting to play up on it. Or it could be Mike Maltese's idea. Maybe he saw Puss Gets the Boot and wasn't impressed and wanted to make a parody. That information's lost to time. I just think it's a coincidence in terms of the timeline with Tom and Jerry. I think it's just a parody on the fact that, yes, it's yet another cat chasing mouse thing. So what we're going to do is go through this short from start to finish, and I'll point out my own observations. There's not really much by way of pop culture references here, but still, let's take a look at it, because this one's an interesting one. Even if it may not become one of my favorites, it's at least a very interesting idea, and there's even a few interesting touches that I definitely wanted to point out. So right away, when we open up with the short, we see the cat and mouse, and this scene goes on for a very long time, but at least it's beautifully timed and it's done well to the music, so there's not really much to say except that it's just your standard chase scene. But it's a great way to establish things that you think, oh yeah, this is just going to be another typical cat versus mouse short. Then we see the mouse just complaining about this being the exact same thing all the time. So again, this is Mike Maltese possibly predicting that some audience members might be going, great, another cat and mouse thing again.
There he goes again, the same old thing. Every time I put my foot out of the hole, he chases me. I just can't go on any longer. There just has to be a showdown. Say, that's it, a showdown. What am I, a man or a mouse? Well, I'm a man.
But one thing to note with the animation of this mouse are the hands, because sometimes the fingers are drawn as though they're stuck together. I wonder who animated this, because we know Herman Cohen is the credited animator, as per that title card I mentioned earlier, and there's Carl Dalton as well, so I wonder who did this. If you have any idea as to who it might be, definitely let me know in the comments. And then we set up what's going to end up playing at the very end, where the mouse says, am I a man or a mouse? He thinks about it for a second and decides that he's a man. Okay, so he goes out and confronts the cat. And this will definitely be another animator because the cat looks a little bit different than what he did in the very beginning. Because here you can see all the detail in his fur, and it's that sort of thing that a lot of the animation studios would eventually do away with, even in Tom and Jerry, where drawing all those bits of fur sticking up just took up a lot of time. So eventually they would streamline things. That's why you would never see later on Friz Freleng doing Sylvester having fur like this, which makes sense. These things didn't have the biggest budgets after all.
Oh, there you are. Now take it easy. I want to talk to you. Sit down. I said sit down!
But I love the design of this cat, and I do like that the front legs look like they're a bit on the rubber hose side as well. There's just something about these early 1940s cats I really enjoyed the design of. And yes, that includes in Puss Gets Boot, where the cat wasn't even named Tom, he was named Jasper. So we see the mouse acting all courageous, telling the cat to sit down. Of course, the cat seems to forget that he could just immediately swipe the mouse at the moment, so I don't think this cat's particularly bright. So the mouse goes on a very long rant about how the cat is always chasing, he's a nervous wreck. And during the rant, there are definitely a few interesting choices that Freleng made. First of all, as the scene goes on, the mouse walks inside the mouse hole and we hear its echoey vocals. It's as though Freleng didn't want to animate part of it. It's a very interesting directing choice. I don't think it quite works, but given that there's so much dialogue here, one of the biggest challenges of a director is to make such dialogue scenes work, or visually interesting to the viewer.
Cats, cats, cats! If I never see another cat, it'll be too soon. That's the trouble with this country. It's overrun with cats. I've got just as much right here as you have. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Guess I'm just old-fashioned. You don't see me going around chasing people.
But another interesting touch, and this is something you would probably associate more with Tex Avery, but you see a white little speck on the ground where the mouse notices it, picks it up and just flings it away.
There's no excuse for it.
So again, this tells me Freleng was trying to see if he can make all this dialogue be more visually interesting to the viewer. And this is also why I think Jones worked better with Maltese, because he seemed to know how to direct such dialogue-heavy scenes better. So the mouse asks the cat, so why do you always chase me? And this is after a whole minute, by the way, of the mouse actually talking and ranting about this whole situation.
Now look, why do you always have to chase me?
Why, cats have always chased mice.
Cats have always chased mice. Now ain't that a stupid answer?
And the cat just innocently replies, why cats always chase mice. Again, it's the law of cartoons, isn't it? And I think this is what Mike Maltese is of course playing up. And that mouse's sarcastic reply kills me. And the cat brings up a point. Well, dogs always chase cats. The mouse is dumbfounded, even breaks the fourth wall, looking at the audience where it's like, yes, we know, this is a trope that you guys are well aware. You've probably seen a million times by now.
Well, dogs have always chased cats.
Dogs have always chased cats. How do you like that?
And so the mouse asks the cat questions. Hey, aren't you sick of being chased? Aren't you annoyed by this dog? And manages to flip the whole conversation to say, hey, instead of chasing me, why don't you tell that dog to stop chasing you? And the cat ends up being convinced and decides, you know what? I'm going to talk to that dog and tell him to stop chasing me.
What's the matter? You yellow?
Well, yes, No, who's yellow? Well, I'm not. Of course I ain't yellow.
Well, then go and tell him to quit chasing you.
By gosh, I will.
So when we cut to the next scene, we see a gag that, as I mentioned earlier, Mike Maltese would do a lot, which is the sign gag, where as you're working along, the signs would end up telling a story or rhyme or whatever. And that's actually a parody of one of the most interesting advertising campaigns of that time, done by a company called Burma Shave. And what they would do is put up signs along the highway, and each sign would tell a line of an actual story or a rhyme. And then the last sign would always be the name of the product. And I like the emphasis at the end of period. And it's got the fancy font there as well. So the cat's getting all nervous, and I like how he checks the chain first, because it sets up the later gag nicely. And so he knocks on Spike's doghouse, which again, I mean, all bulldogs by law have to be named Spike, don't they? And I like how we just pan over, we're trying to find where the cat is, and he ends up being high up. I mean, he is a cat after all. Cats aren't exactly brave for the most part.
Just passing by and thought I'd say hello.
And so we get a whole scene of the cat trying to convince the dog, and again, this is one of Maltese's traits. He seemed to love doing some of these dialogue-heavy scenes. But I'm glad during all of this, Freleng adds the added touch where the dog lifts up his paw as though he's maybe going to hit the cat. But no, he was just there to scratch a flea. But during that time, the cat runs away all scared. So again, he's a cat, so no surprises there. So the cat goes on and on about how you've bullied me for long enough, and ends up kicking the bowl with water in it onto the dog's head.
You bullied me long enough. I'm gonna put my foot down. I'm sorry, Spike. I'm sorry. Now, don't get excited. Accidents will happen, you know. There's no harm done.
You know, say what you want about this scene, you might think it goes on too long. I certainly do, but at least the animation acting is really effective here, especially when he's trying to fix up Spike's face. But then the cat continues to tell Spike off, and I really enjoy Spike's expression there where he's just waiting for this cat to stop talking. And we even cut to the nearby gate closing to set up the gag, but I don't know if we even really needed that to sell the next bit. I get why they did it, because later on you'll see the cat trying to climb up again, but the gate's no longer open. I still think they could have done that a little bit better. But remember the whole thing with the chain that I mentioned earlier on? Well, the cat ends up picking up the chain and realizing, whoops, the dog isn't chained.
You think I'm brave because you're chained up, huh? Well, why this chain is... He ain't chained. He ain't chained! Oh. Spike isn't chained.
So he did all that courage for nothing. So the cat freaks out and tries to climb up again, and then he realizes the door isn't there. Honestly, you could have cut out the bit with the gate closing and him trying to climb up. You could have just started the chase right away. I don't think you needed this. Yeah, it's a minor nitpick, but I just thought I'd point that out because it felt out of place. And then we get a bit where I'm sure Leon Schlesinger would have been happy with this, and I'm sure Friz too, because he didn't really have to animate much. You just have the whole painting of the house, and then you just pan through the different rooms and just have sound effects. And Treg Brown would have had a field day with this one too. And honestly, this was quite fun. I enjoy listening to long scenes that have Treg Brown sound effects, and you can just only imagine how gruesome all of this actually is. So this scene goes on a while, but then it just fades into the next scene. I still think they could have maybe added one more thing there, I don't know, but we see that the mouse is all chill inside the cat's basket, and yes, that is the cat's name there, don't laugh. And we see the cat, he's all injured. My goodness, that dog really must have done a number on him. And this dialogue exchange between the cat and mouse is fantastic, especially the sarcasm coming out of the cat's mouth where he just couldn't see it your way.
Oh, hello. Well, have an accident?
Yes, I'm afraid I did.
That's too bad. Say, by the way, how'd you come out with the dog?
Dog? Oh, yes, dog. No, he just couldn't see it your way.
Then he's going to keep on chasing you?
Mm-hmm.
Just that line delivery. Even in Mel Blanc's regular voice, I love how he does such deliveries. But then the chase begins, which is literally just lifted from earlier on in the short, because hey, you can see that he's not even bandaged up in the next scene. So we're back to square one, and everything is the same except for the end punchline where the mouse asks himself, am I a man or a mouse? No, he's a mouse. and it just ends there. A rather so-so ending. Oh, and if you listen to the end, Merry-Go-Round Broke Down, it's a weird rendition at the very end of this one. It's a Blue Ribbon reissue though, so I don't know where that ending rendition comes from. So this one's more interesting. It's, I like it, especially with a lot of the wordplay, and I like the fact that this is just pushing back on all the usual cat versus mouse cartoons that you would have seen all throughout the previous decades during the 1930s. I just think someone like Jones from the late 40s onwards would have done much better with this kind of a script. That's not to say Friz Freleng poorly directed this or anything. For the most part, it's actually quite good. You got your usual Friz Freleng timing, especially in the chase scene, and especially when the cat is walking alongside those signs. And he tries to break up the constant dialogue as well, to make things more interesting for the viewer, but honestly, this one's probably not one I'm going to revisit too often. It's more interesting than anything. This one gets 6.5 out of 10. It's fine for what it is, and I see it as more of an experiment, really. One where the results are perhaps more interesting than haha funny, but that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
Longer. I'll tell him just once more. It's gotta stop. What am I, a man or a mouse?
I'm a mouse.